questions afterwards, I'll get my AI to answer them for you. Okay, so let's begin. Very briefly, just some stats. So this is actually taken from a survey that was done actually at the back end of last year. It was Salesforce. It was looking at kind of overall usage, adoption of AI, generative AI overall. To cut a long story short, for me, one of the kind of key findings there was that, yes, last year, doesn't matter whether it's the PR industry or any other sector, most people tried out or played around with a Gen AI tool. Almost certainly it was ChatGPT. Almost certainly it was the free version. For me, though, and call me self-serving, what I found interesting for this survey was the fact that the vast majority of people out there, irrespective of sector or industry, had received zero training, zero guidance as to how AI could be used and did apply to their particular space. So to tie back with one of the themes, you know, what is the CIPR doing to assist members? Well, again, call me self-serving. I think I'm probably right in saying that I helped the CIPR basically develop the world's first ever AI comms PR workshop, which we have been delivering for the last 18 months. That's gone from a 1-day to a 2-day workshop. So it's proving incredibly popular. I've certainly personally involved in delivering many kind of group and regional group webinars throughout the last 18 months, and I'm happy to carry on doing that. So I think on one level, the CIPR is kind of definitely providing access to training and resources that people should find helpful. One of the sidebar from that Salesforce survey, though, which was slightly worrying, was the 55% of people who said that they were using AI tools that their organizations had explicitly banned the use of. I will spend a few minutes talking about ethics and so on and so forth about the usage thereof of AI tools, but it cannot be denied. There are a lot of people out there that are looking at the possible benefits of AI. They're being told by their organizations, you're not allowed to use this stuff, certainly at the moment, but they're doing it anyway. And I cannot believe for a second this isn't happening out there. Just people aren't telling you, so we should be aware of that. Now, despite all the hype, and despite of what Salesforce survey was saying, you have this kind of thing that came out only a few days ago. This was a kind of Reuters Institute survey, 12,000 people in 6 countries. The headline figure, of course, says, look, despite all the hype, who's actually using AI tools on a daily basis? Now, admittedly, this was based on the general public rather than the industry, but I think it's still kind of reflective of what's actually happening, that in terms of people using AI tools and technology day in, day out, that's still a relatively small number of people. I think even now, 18 months down the track, we aren't really seeing widespread application of AI to support it. And there are a bunch of issues as to why that is the case, and I'll come to those in a second. Then you get surveys like this from Cision PR Week a few months ago, suggesting that in Europe, actually we're ahead of the US market, as in 42% of PR practitioners saying that they frequently use generative AI. Now, of course, that survey didn't actually drill into, but what are they using it for? And again, when we say frequently, is that the case that, oh yeah, I fire up the free version of ChatGPT once every couple of days, and I ask it to do something, and that's the extent of it, as opposed to AI being applied to the full spectrum of communications work. And it's not just about asking it to draft a press release for you. There's a whole lot more that generative AI can be applied to. So I guess this is kind of a scene setter. That I think that's kind of currently where we are. I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but you all know it's true. The pace of technological development in AI is not slowing down. I cannot see it slowing down anytime soon. That continues to be a bit of a challenge. Probably one of the most commonly asked questions I always get, oh, what's the best tool to use? And I always say, well, there isn't one, because there is no single tool that can do everything for you. And of course, PR professionals never want to spend money on tools. So, oh, what can I get for free? Well, you can get this for free, but you're not going to get the full range and extent of benefits unless you are prepared to pay something. Now, that's a fair question. If I'm going to have to pay, what do I get in return for it? We'll explore that in a second. In terms of use cases, again, in a session like this, I haven't got time to drill into the detail, but with respect to Chris Penn, who's I think somebody worth paying attention to these things, these are going to 7 overall use cases that he sees Gen AI are being applied to, and I tend to agree with him. Content generation is the fairly obvious one, but there's a whole raft of other things which I think are still very much underexploited in the PR sector. You know, extraction and summarization, the ability to supply huge amounts of data and information to an AI and asking it to analyze it and assess it, reducing the time it takes to do the work that we're still expected to do. There are obviously there are time savings and efficiencies to be gained. Things like rewriting, not just asking the Gen AI tool to do it for you. You create the content, but then use it as an assistant, and a quite useful assistant for input on you know, whether or not you're using too many cliches and so on and so forth. Classification, again, I think there's a lot of potential for AI in the measurement and evaluation space, and again, I still don't think it's particularly well understood about how those things can be applied, and that's still, again, that's an ongoing, I think, education job for the industry as a whole. To say CIPR, I think, doing its best in terms of, you know, certainly through training, you know, the extent to which CIPR as an organization would want to you know, broaden that scope and access. Well, that's obviously a separate question, but that's kind of where we are. We just turn to the tools, because I mentioned already, you know, why is it the case that for all the hype, yeah, and for all the kind of the interest in it, the brutal reality is that are people really using kind of AI, you know, day in, day out, and applying it to the whole raft and spectrum of communications work? Well, cost is an issue. It's one thing to say, oh, look, I can access GPT-4 or GPT-4o, which is the recently upgraded version, which is quite good. And you can access that for free. But of course, free isn't really free, because if it's free, anything you put in, by definition, the AI company on the other end says, I might use that to train a future version of the model. Issues of data governance, which we'll come on to as well. There are limits on what you get for nothing. You know, you will soon find out if you try to use ChatGPT 4.0 for any extended length of time, they'll say, oh, sorry, you've had your free goes today, come back tomorrow. Oh dear. That's your trade-off. Your trade-off is, if I can avoid paying for it, I'll do my best. If you're using it infrequently, maybe that's sufficient. Again, no single AI platform will do everything for you well. Claude AI arguably is a better AI if you're looking for assistance in generating written content compared to say ChatGPT. You can use Claude for free to a point, but again, there's a limit to what you get for nothing. Equally, even if you do think, okay, if I have to pay, what am I looking at? So, you know, do we spend $20 per month per person to give everybody access to ChatGPT Plus? Well, even with 5 people, that's suddenly do the maths in my head. That's $100 a month. Suddenly, the costs appear to mount up. There are ways to get access to a lot of these technologies for a lot less money. So it's the difference between paying per user and paying as you go. The trade-off there is that the pay as you go route typically involves using less user-friendly access points, although arguably, I personally don't think that unfriendly. For example, if you create an OpenAI account, that's not the same as creating a ChatGPT account. That would give you access to GPT-4, but you only pay for the tokens that you use, and you can control the spends. You can arguably give access to a lot more people. So I think, again, comes back to kind of education understanding. It's an understanding of what other tools are actually available, what are some tools better at doing than others currently, and that's another challenge, because of course I could say today that Claude's better than GPT, but then this afternoon, GPT might make some announcement and then invalidate it. To get slightly technical, things like the context window, how much information can I supply a platform and it can actually utilize it? Well, currently Google Gemini 1.5 Pro is the leader there, 1 million token context window. I could give it the equivalent of every single Harry Potter novel and ask it to write a new one, and it would be able to do that within a single session. And those kind of capabilities are going to continue to grow, and it'll swap from tool to tool. Ultimately, I think the question has always been, rather than get bogged down in trying to figure out which tools to pick and select, what is the work that we're actually being asked to do? And from that, using that as the starting point, figuring out where AI might be able to support, not necessarily replace the task involved, but certainly to kind of support the human being in doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. And again, we haven't got time in a session like this to kind of really kind of drill into the ramifications of what does this mean for the skills that a PR practitioner should have today. A lot of talk in the last 18 months, for example, of prompt engineering being a vital skill. Well, it sort of is and it isn't. Some argue that over time, the need for prompt engineering skills will decrease because the AI tools will just kind of know what it is that you're asking them to do. I don't see that happening tomorrow, maybe in the next kind of couple of years, but right now there are certainly ways and means in which to get better outputs, superior outputs, if you understand what you need to do in order to extract that from it. But I think fundamentally it is about trying to figure out, well, what am I supposed to be here to do? What are the tasks that still remain firmly in the human-only camp? I would argue that whether we like it or not, they're kind of reducing. There's still a whole huge middle ground of human plus AI, and that for me is the sweet spot. Again, this is kind of a shopping list of possible tools. I think we're all familiar with the main platforms: GPT, Claude, Gemini. It's also worth knowing about things like Perplexity, an AI-powered search engine, which I think, after myself having used Google since 1998, the first real competitor to it, and given sort of Google's ongoing travails with its search generative experience, Perplexity is definitely worth paying attention to. Again, we haven't got time to drill into the detail here, but fundamentally, it boils down to, I think, ultimately, you are going to have to pay for something. So what are you prepared to pay? What will you get back in return for paying? If you are prepared to bite the bullet and look at those API pay-as-you-go routes, that certainly gives you the option to access more of the benefits, more of the functionality at a lower price, with more cost control, but accept the fact that it will require some effort on your part to familiarize yourself with how these systems work. I've been boring people to death for the last year or so in that, what have you got to lose in creating an OpenAI account? Well, nothing. And if you do, you as I say, get access to all that functionality, much more cost control, and potentially certainly for organizations, the ability to kind of widen the access to it. Now, I just said prompt engineering is not necessarily going to be a skill that's required forever, but right now, yes, having an understanding of how to give the AI tool a good brief is definitely worth knowing about. All I want to say here is that there are some fantastic tools available. Structuredprompt.com, which is free, an excellent tool in allowing you to create those more structured prompts. If it's learned anything over the last 18 months about what gives you a superior output, it's giving the AI a good brief. It's breaking it down into structure. Don't just ask it to draft a press release. That's a poor brief. Imagine you got that as a brief. Yeah, you'd be complaining. So why should the AI be any different? This is one example of a framework, the Tracy framework. Define the task. What are you asking it to do? define the role that you want AI to take on board. If you're asking it to draft a press release, tell it to take on board the role of somebody who's actually quite good at doing it. Job descriptions actually can be quite useful for putting the role or filling out the requirement for the role. Who's the intended audience for your output? Again, this should be meat and drink to PR practitioners. Think clearly about who the output is intended for and put that in the brief, put that in the prompt. What's the outcome you're looking for by creating this content? Again, put it in the brief. And you might think, well, it's a machine. How can it possibly kind of put itself in the shoes of a human being? Well, surprisingly, as all the AI companies will cheerfully tell you, this shouldn't work, but it kind of does. So it's worth doing that. Aside from structured prompts, the Claude has recently, in fact, last 2 weeks, has produced its own prompting tool. Again, you can input a top-level prompt. It will try to assist you in building out a more detailed and structured prompt. But again, comes back to kind of education, understanding, and training. So, what can we do? What can we do? Well, again, I've been boring for Britain by advising people, start with your existing current workflows. How do you currently go about doing what you do, and try to figure out where might there be some low-hanging fruit opportunities to apply AI to parts of those processes. A classic one sounds kind of mundane, but AI meeting assistants. Simply having an AI meeting assistant that faithfully transcribes and summarizes what was discussed can save hours and hours of time that would have traditionally been spent on writing up meeting notes, contact reports, and so on and so forth. As I say, it might sound mundane, but those hours that you've got back can hopefully now be applied to much more value-added, strategic, and useful activity. And certainly the feedback I get from people who have begun applying that in a kind of wholesale manner is that, yes, you do get your time back, or you do get some of your time back, and that's rather good, because then you can start to, as I say, apply it to other things. Or the perennial challenge, people say to me, Andrew, where do you find the time to kind of carve out, to even remotely try and figure out what AI could or couldn't be applied to? And it's quite simple. Use AI to free up the time. So you buy back some of that time so you can start to explore it yourself. Again, based on feedback from either training workshop attendees or the many in-house teams of consultancies that I've personally worked with over the last 18 months, those that have begun this kind of approach of analyzing workflows and seeing where AI can hopefully be systematically applied, on the whole, the feedback is yes, those efficiencies are definitely there to be had. So that's a good starting point. Ethical considerations. Now, given I've got about 9 minutes left, I can't really do justice to this properly. This, of course, has been an issue all along, and it's not going to go away. The perennial sort of questions about, just because I can do it, should I? Disclosure, the extent of your disclosure about your use of AI in terms of the work that you do, certainly for PR firms, being kind of clear and transparent to clients about when you did or didn't, utilize AI, depending on what you're using it for. Nobody's got the answer on this one. There's no definitive rule book. Even the existing kind of code of conduct from the CIPR, I think, kind of does, covers a lot of ground there. Being honest, being open, being transparent, that should always be your kind of guiding principle. But there are always lots of nooks and crannies and nuances, and I encounter them every day. I think we just have to bite the bullet on this and accept that there is no magic solution right now, and there probably isn't going to be in anytime soon. We're going to have to treat this on a kind of case by case basis. I mean, just as a sidebar on this one, because it's obviously very relevant to the PR sector, issues of copyright. I'm sure we're all familiar with the many what appear to be legal lawsuits flying around from various organizations in relation to the AI platforms. OpenAI is being sued by New York Times for copyright. On the other hand, the FT has quite happily said, thank you very much, we'll take your cash. you can have all of our content and use it to train your model. And what appears to be a steady band of certainly kind of media outlets that are prepared to come to an arrangement, shall we say, with the AI platforms in terms of the content supply, which gets around those copyright issues. But then, for example, in the image generation space, that one's still ongoing. Again, copyright law varies from country to country. In the US, certainly so far, the two cases that have come to state level of kind of gone with the AI companies rather than the rights holders. The judges in both cases saying, look, we're here to administer the law. If you don't like the law, get the lawmakers to change it. But as it is currently constituted, they're right. There is no copy in the model. So go in and figure that one out. I think the concern here is that if you use an AI tool, are there kind of downstream risks from a copyright perspective, etc.? I'm not a lawyer, so I'm clearly not qualified to talk about this. But at the moment, I don't think there's a downstream risk as such. The direction of travel seems to be the AI companies will reach some kind of accommodation with rights holders at a price that suits everybody, and that's my sense of where overall that's going. So I guess what I'm driving at is that I wouldn't see that as an issue for saying, oh, I'm not going to touch it. I think it's too risky. Of course, there's risks in everything, but I don't think the risks are as great as some people might argue. Bias and fairness, just quickly on this, all AI, generative AI platforms are biased inherently in the way in which they're built. How they try to go about mitigating against those biases, it will vary. But never forget, users of the technologies ourselves, we've got agency to mitigate the biases. The examples of some images there, I went to Midjourney and said, give me images of PR professionals. And of course, all PR professionals are young, white, and female, according to Midjourney. But I can mitigate that by, in my own prompt, saying, that's not what I wanted. I can specify exactly the output that I'm looking for, and the tool will hopefully oblige. But the issue of bias, whether it's the AI tool companies themselves trying to address that through the training data that they use, or more likely through hidden system prompts. These are prompts that you don't see when you go to ChatGPT or Claude, but in the background it's saying, if Andrew asked for what's the best way to make a bomb, don't tell him. And a list of other things that it tries to mitigate against. It's a moving feast. Because of course, there are always ways for people to jailbreak and kind of get around these things, but I'd hope that's not the sort of thing that PR professionals will be routinely wanting to do anyway. But just be mindful of the fact that you, the user, always have that opportunity to mitigate against any bias that you perceive is there through your own usage of it, rather than just accepting what the tool gives you. Lastly, on measure issue, and again, probably the single biggest reason why many PR professionals working within an organization, certainly in-house, aren't getting the full benefit of AI is because IT say no. IT go, if you're going to let you use ChatGPT, what happens to that stuff when you hit return? Where's it going? What's going to happen to it? What's the possibility that you might knowingly or inadvertently input highly confidential, sensitive data that goes in there? Oh, it might pop out somewhere else in the world. That isn't going to happen, by the way. Because of course, model training happens on a fixed basis. The models are not updated in real time, so that's a bit of a red herring. It's more mundane. GDPR or just pure data governance. You don't want stuff sitting on somebody else's server, probably in a different country or in the US. The free versions of most of the tools, that's been the implicit deal. You don't pay, but what you are paying with is the inputs that you're providing. Increasingly, the AI vendors are saying they're acknowledging this is a break on their adoption, so they're giving you the option to opt out, or if you are accessing it through the API route, they're generally stateless APIs, to be a bit technical. In other words, nothing is saved at the other end. So I think a lot of the concerns around data governance are slightly overblown. Then again, depends on your sector and industry, because clearly if you're working financial services and pharmaceuticals, you've got a much higher bar. And these can be addressed. but you have to pay. You know, you want the fullest confidence in data governance and data security. OpenAI and ChatGPT will happily give that to you if you have their enterprise version, with the accompanying very large invoice that you'll get, which for the vast majority of organizations anywhere is too much. But the direction of travel on this, I think, is definitely in the vein of making it as easy as possible to use these technologies, and overcoming those concerns around data governance and data security. And right now, there are there's a range of ways in which that can be done. But again, the usual story: the higher the level of confidence that you want, the more likely you're going to have to pay for that, depending on the vendor that you're intending to work with. There you go, 28 minutes. I hope that's done justice to what I was asked to do.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
And I'll stop screen sharing.
You had to speak really quickly as well to get through that. Thank you. I noticed nobody's actually put anything in the chat yet, but feel free to do that now. Or, I mean, I don't know how you feel about. There you go. Avril's got her hand up. Maybe Avril can ask a question.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for that. Really useful. And yes, I mean, you're taking the biggest subject in the world and trying to do it in 28 minutes. So I applaud you on that alone. The question I had was, you know, this bias piece, because, you know, you're taking basically the mindset of a white male North American tech guy in his 30s to maybe 20s to 40s, right? And we've seen it come up around faces of color and even hand dryers, not being able to dry people's hands because they're a different color. But, you know, it's one thing saying we can mitigate it, but you're at risk of also just amplifying your own biases, right? If you happen to align with any of their biases, or, you know, it's really difficult, isn't it? How do we address it?
Of course not. Of course not. I mean,
yeah.
And let's be honest. I mean, to try and keep my response as succinct as possible, I said it, that the way in which generative AI technologies are currently built, of course they're going to be biased. If you literally take a massive chunk of the web, pretty much unfiltered, what a surprise.
AI, right? Just the web.
80% of the web anyway is based on, you know, American English, Western, etc. Of course, they're all scrabbling around now trying to find more data sources, and of course, you know, good luck to them. So on that basis alone, it's going to be biased. But then again, who decides what is biased or not biased? We saw the whole issues around Google a few weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago now, updated version of Gemini, and there was a whole bunch of people saying, oh, yeah, I asked it for a picture of George Washington and I got back a black George Washington. Google's woke, you know. You know, so even when the AI companies are trying to kind of do the right thing, as well, I'm assuming they are, you're never going to keep everybody happy. But to your point about, in fact, it's actually Dove actually produced a really good guide to getting more realistic female images out of AI tools, and it's a really good. We should dig it out. It's free. It's actually quite a good guide to how to more mindful prompting. You know, don't just accept you know, what the AI just gives you, or you need to be more mindful about what you're asking it for. Yeah, if you're aware of the fact that yes, if I just ask it for PR professionals, well, yeah, it's going to give you back what I got. That's not what you had in mind.
To your point, it's not even just about images, isn't it? Just, you're right. Even just everything. The data sets, everything online that it's scraping is totally
and largely that's not strictly true. I mean, the original versions would have just taken all that stuff as is. From a technical standpoint, the danger is they start trying to play around with the training data set. That has a knock-on effect on the model. See, ideally, you see from a techie AI standpoint, just take the raw data initially, then you can fine tune it. So there's always different aspects of the process that will influence the AI model itself and what you put in and what you might get back as a response. As they all cheerfully admit, they've no idea what's going on inside the model. Anthropic, the Claude company, has been doing more research into interpretability, and they've made some small little strides forward, but we're nowhere near at any point actually knowing, why does it give me that when I put that in and I get this out? So we should be aware of that.
And the second point, I know I hear sort of agencies building their own models that they're going to supposedly sell to clients. I mean,
no, they're not.
They're
not. There's no way they're building models. There's no way
they're not models, but they're building their own way, the interface that's going to, you know, the client can put your data in, and then we'll put our PR, you know, mindset. I mean, I can't see these selling because I think the bigger clients are already way ahead of us in the first.
I think that the challenge there is that whether we like it or not, there are a handful of companies that have got the gargantuan resources to build these big models. And increasingly what you find, well, look at the example of Bloomberg. So last year, Bloomberg said, hey, we've got 40 years of all this financial data. ChatGPT hasn't got that. So we're going to build Bloomberg GPT. So if you've got anything that's related to financial output or content, surely we've got the edge there. It's a fair assumption. Then it's like, hang on, let's check that. Let's test. It was done last year, end of last year, GPT-4 versus Bloomberg and all these financial related matters. And it's like, oh dear, turns out GPT-4 as a massive generalist platform is still better than you, who've got ostensibly probably as good proprietary data as anybody. And yet it would seem that these big general platforms, omni-use platforms on the whole, are just going to get better and better because of the massive resources thrown at them. So the idea that, you know, small specialized type of outcompete. I'm not saying it's impossible, but to your point about if, with respect to agencies out there saying, hey, you know, I'm sorry, they do not have big enough proprietary data sources to make that much of a difference. Pockets. Yeah, you know, you'd be better off just accepting, let's take a proprietary model and augment it, you know, rather than you know, open source, fine if you want to devote energy resources, technical resources to kind of, you know, taking llama and playing around with the weights and parameters. But again, so far I've been waiting to find out, has anybody actually said, look, all that effort and investment in building some kind of, you know, open source bespoke model actually results in superior outputs compared to just going to GPT or Claude or Gemini. And so far I haven't heard it. Maybe somebody will now I've said it, but I think overall for the industry, I think it's more, we should be focusing on our own expertise, you know. I'm not getting too, I'm a fine one to talk, but you know, not getting too obsessed with the technology itself. Yeah, it's that fine balancing act of properly understanding.
But we're comms people first, right? Not AI.
There you go. I entirely agree. That's exactly it. Ultimately, we're here to do comms, and how do we best do that?
There's a reason why we're not all accountants, right?
Yeah.
Much to my parents' disappointment, but there you go.
Thank you for your question. There's a couple more in the chat now. So Mandy has asked if you've seen any good policies for using AI within comms or organisations generally, and then there's a couple more questions as well around GCS and its own AI copilot.
Okay.
So
well, I'll quickly take them in turn. Have I seen any? I guess define what you mean by a good policy. There are plenty of policies out there, but on the whole, I guess it's understandable. They're kind of top level. I mean, if I'm being cheeky, I can characterize most of them as saying, you know, don't be an idiot. You know, you know, some organizations, they kind of build it into the tech where the minute you try and go to use ChatGPT, up pops a screen that says, whoa, I can see you're going to use ChatGPT. You know, be very mindful about what you're going to put in there, etc. You know, we can't prevent you from inputting it, but, you know, ultimately, you really shouldn't be sticking anything of a kind of highly confidential, sensitive nature in there, even though it's very tempting because, you know, it'll take you 5 minutes to do it rather than 3 hours it normally takes you. Yeah, the secret cyborgs that are out there going, who's going to know? I'll just do it anyway and take my chances. So, and again, if I'm cheeky about it, a lot of people just use GPT or Claude to say, can you give me a framework for a decent policy? And it will. It'll give you a decent starting point. It boils down to the level of detail and granularity that you might want to put into those those policies. But I think it's very easy to over-index on that standpoint. I think IT needs to be a lot more involved. IT quite often the break. They're sitting there going, even we don't have that AI expertise. So the easiest thing to say is no. Until we've kind of figured it out. How long is that going to take? Well, we don't know. So stop bothering us. We've got lots of other stuff on our plate. Meanwhile, the comms department's sitting there thinking, I've just done that training workshop with Andrew, and it's shown us all this amazing stuff we could do, but we can't because we're not allowed to use this stuff. So there is that. On GCS, little anecdote. A couple of months ago, I gave a presentation to the Department of Ministry of Defence, and Simon Bauer was on before me, but he'd gone before I had a chance to ask him. But people came up to me saying, Andrew, what's the GCS doing on AI? I'm like, why are you asking me? I don't know for the GCS. Simon was here like half an hour ago. Why do you ask him? I get conflicting reports. On one level, umpteen different models are being tried out and tested. Different departments are apparently using X, Y, or Z. I don't know is the answer. I don't know. The GCS has developed its own AI copilot. Maybe it has, but is it actually being used in anger? I don't know. I read that recent report, and if you look at the fine detail, it suggests, yes, we've developed it, but we haven't rolled it out yet. I don't know is the answer. I don't know. They're doing something, but with all respect, I'm not entirely aware of exactly who is doing what. It sounds like they're talking to Microsoft. They're looking at open source. There's all manner of different technical approaches being used, but I personally would love some crystal clear clarity. Maybe I shouldn't be asking for it. I don't work for the GCS, but I just would have thought, with respect, it might be helpful just to kind of stop people asking those, not being self-serving. And they're welcome to ask the question, but I can't give them a decent answer because I don't know. I really don't know.
Thank you. There's a question as well from Samantha about the code of conduct and whether or not we need to amend it. You said something about including "don't be stupid" or something like that. Well, as a general policy, we say
no. That's way above my pay grade, quite frankly. Should it? I don't know. Should there be at least some interim kind of guidance about usage? Personally, yeah, probably. But there's some basic rules of thumb, really. Quite frankly, sorry.
So I was going to say Claire is on the call as well, and she's very helpfully pointed out that the Professional Practices Committee are actually looking at that question right now. So we might be able to answer that at some point.
Excellent.
There we go. And I'll also point out that I think our IT manager is on the call in the background somewhere listening. So we'll have some food for thought after the call as well.
Yes.
On that.
API is your friend. Get up an AI account and a Claude API account and a Gemini API account, and you can have a lot more confidence that what you're putting in isn't being utilized at the other end, as opposed to using what I would describe as the retail versions of these technologies. Just my opinion, of course.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? We've got a couple of minutes left. Our next meeting for this group of people starts at 1, but we've kind of put an end point on here of 1:45 to give everybody a bit of a break. So we do have another few minutes if anybody wants to ask any more questions. Feel free. There are some staff members on the call, but I did ask them to be quiet and let everybody else, all of the volunteers, have the opportunity to ask questions. So if there are any staff who want to ask questions as well, you can jump in. Oh, John's there. John's a stalwart volunteer. Okay.
Greetings, pot pickers. How you doing? All right.
Hi, John.
How you doing, Andy? It's really good to see you.
You too.
There are a number of meeting AI tools, and it's very easy to jump between them and and see which ones. I've not come across Read or Read AI. I'm having a look at it while you were chatting, just to have a little route around there. have you tried many of them and arrived at read? Because some of them I find quite intrusive. Some of them it's quite hard to get. It's quite hard to get them to log in unless you make it a default, and then it's hard. Then of course it's a pain in the neck to keep them out if you don't want them. And
well, I mean, just very briefly on that one. I mean, on one level, certainly if you're looking at online meetings, then of course all the usual suspect Teams, Zoom, Google Meet, all have their own inbuilt transcribers and so forth. Of course, Microsoft being Microsoft says, oh, if you want the full 9 yards, pony up. The benefit of a third-party tool like say a Firefly is it supports all those different platforms, and Fireflies, understandably, I think there's a decent job of explaining the self-evident question of how secure is this. So from a technical standpoint, I think it largely addresses that. But again, that depends on the organization and your level of need. Yeah, there are gazillions of these damn things now. I mean, I've tried to look at most of them. I kind of tend to use Firefly's AI as my kind of main go-to. Read.ai, it is quite intrusive, that one, I will say. It also Read AI also has that extra, shall I say, creep factor where it not only transcribes what's said, but it analyzes the facial expressions and body language of participants. It gives you a personal charisma score. So it's like, I'm sorry, Andrew, but your charisma score was a bit low today. You might be getting an email from HR to give you some meeting training to kind of up your charisma score. Or you start a meeting by saying, I want everyone to smile and nod all the way through to keep our charisma scores up. That, I think, is just a bridge too far. But there it is. And you can guarantee there are organizations out there going, what a great idea. There's a metric. Fantastic. Now we've got a metric we can measure people by in terms of their participation and so forth. So yes, that's a whole other issue altogether. But from a simple standpoint of should you just use what the platform gives you, or do you use the third-party tool? There are pros and cons to both. And from the data governance standpoint, Fireflies and Assembly as well. Assembly is another tool. I think from my reading of it, offer the kind of the most assurance about how they treat the saving and storing of those transcriptions and so forth. But of course, you get what you pay for. Don't get it all for free.
no.
Perfect timing. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending and asking questions. And Andrew has very kindly said that he'll send us a summary using his AI tool that is attending the meeting today. So we'll circulate the recording link for those of you who weren't able to attend in person, and also a summary of the answers of these questions that were asked as well. I think Andrew said that. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording and end the call, and I'll see hopefully some of you, or lots of you, at 1 o'clock. And thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you. Onwards to victory.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Yes, bye.